Hello and welcome to another episode of Releasing Your Inner Dragon. Today we are going to talk about when is too much too much? When do you lose readers by hurting your characters too much? When do you lose readers by causing too much misery and you lose their trust and they stop reading you? And of course, lines are going to be different for different people, but we're going to talk about the risks you run and the things to be aware of when you do drastic things to your characters. But before we get into that, we should introduce ourselves. And I am Marie Mullaney. I run a fantasy YouTube world building channel called Just in Time Worlds, and I write epic fantasy. With me, as always, is my co-host Drake.
Hi, I am Maxwell Alexander Drake, and I just got distracted. I'm an award-winning novelist. I'm a former lead fiction writer for EverQuest Next from Sony. I teach writing all over the world, and I do this wonderful podcast with this wonderful partner of mine.
And if you want to help us get more listeners and views, and we have hit 10,000 downloads on the podcast, which is very cool. So if you'd like us to hit 10,000 and another one, then please do like, share, subscribe, do all those things, give us stars if your platform allows for stars, tell people about us, help us to beat the algorithm and get the word out about the podcast.
And just wanted to say that this podcast is sponsored by me and the Writers Room. If you would like to work closer with me and Marie and actually improve your writing on a weekly basis, then we've launched a platform that can have you achieve just that. Both me and Marie are in the writer's room. We're actively working with people. I'm doing, critique pods. Marie's doing critique pods. I'm doing writer's classes. There's a whole bunch of extra, different things that you get, different learning exercises, and plus just the whole community. The whole community is a group of professional minded people who want to actually become really great at the craft of writing to enhance their potential for perhaps actually making a living at this crazy thing called writing. So if you would like to be a part of that, you can either go to writersroom.us and sign up. It's $100 a month. Or if you would like a 50% off monthly discount, I am, while we're in the launching phase, while we're getting new members for a very limited time, I am offering 50% off memberships for as long as you're a member. However, I can't post that link. You've got to send me an email or reach out to me on social media, or however you want to get in touch with me. Go to starvingwriterstudio.com and you can send a message from there, however you want to do it. But if you get in touch with me and tell me, you'd like to get that discount code, I will send it to you, and then you can join, and then you'll just have 50% off for as long as you want to be a member. So if it is something you're interested in, I highly recommend that you check it out. I guarantee you will make you a better writer.
Okay, so let's talk about when books just become misery porn. So I'll start, since I was the one who pitched this topic. So in the plotting of Magic 4, Drake floated the idea of having Buri sacrifice her magic. And I kicked back against that quite strongly. And I was thinking about it during the course of this week as to why I was kicking back so strongly, why I was so resistant to the thought. And it comes down to, and it's weird because, obviously I trust myself and I trust Drake, but it's weird because I don't trust authors who go to that lengths, who hurt their characters that much. And the reason why I don't is because the authors that I've encountered that do that don't give me a payoff worthy of that kick in the teeth. They leave me feeling like I knew this great character, and then this great character got crippled by the things the author did. And then there was no payoff. And now I'm left feeling sad and miserable. And that is not what I want out of my entertainment fantasy. I do not read for a tragedy. Shakespeare's tragedies are not my favorite Shakespeare plays. I know everybody says they're the greatest. They're not the ones I love. So, and I don't love Romeo and Juliet either. I'm personally a comedy fan, just FYI.
Right.
But and I'm thinking specifically here of authors like Robin Hobb. Now, Robin Hobb writes incredibly well. It is glorious to read her. But I have the fourth book of Fitz sitting in my Kindle library, and I'm not going to read it because I know that she's just going to hurt Fitz, and there's not going to be a happy ending. And well, I mean, do I really want to go through all that again? I went through it in the first trilogy, and I don't really need to do it again. So there's that. And then there's the Dresden Files. Now, I am a really big Dresden Files fan. I own all of the audiobooks. I own the ebooks. I own the physical books. I really, truly do love that series. At the end of the last book, I put it down. I put the book down, and I was like, I don't know if I'm ever going to read another one. Because what Jim Butcher did to Harry in that book, I don't trust Jim anymore to give Harry any kind of growth, satisfactory growth, or reaching beyond it, or I just don't trust him anymore, because it has been too much of like, this happens to Harry every time and nothing ever changes, and I can't take it anymore. So, and that is the long story of why I kicked back so strongly against the idea of taking Buri's magic away, because I'm like, okay, but now we're just kicking the character in the teeth like all these other authors. And I'm not going to feel satisfied with whatever arc we come up with, because I don't trust anybody who does that. And I mean, that's not obviously legit. Obviously, not all authors do that, but it did bring up the question to me: when do authors push it too far? When do authors hurt their characters to the point where readers just go, yeah, I'm done. I'm done. I'm not reading you again.
Yeah. So, it's so similar to so much of what both of us preach. But like last night in the critique pod in the writer's room, I went down for a different reason, but I went down a path that I go through every class. I go through, it seems like, every critique pod. And it's one of my Drakeisms where I say, look, your characters aren't real. Your story isn't real. Your world isn't real. Your conflict isn't real. None of it is real. The only thing that is real is the audience. That's it. So every word you write, every sentence you construct, every paragraph you create, every scene that you unfold is there to affect the reader and nothing else. The character doesn't need to learn anything because they're not real. The character doesn't need to save anyone because they're not real. Like, nothing. It's none of it is real. The only thing that's real is on the other side. And so I feel like a lot of authors and storytellers that make these mistakes, they fall into the, oh, but I want to do this. It's cool to me to do this. And maybe even in the land of George Martin, it's a sadistic, no, I want to. I mean, he refuses to admit it now, but the reason why he wrote Game of Thrones was because he thought fantasy authors were stupid in how they wrote fantasy. He literally said in the beginning of it, I'm going to write a story that's going to show you how life would really be like if you had this world where everything was monsters and evil and magic and all this stuff. Everyone would just die. And you guys are just writing it stupid. And then somehow it became his number one best-selling ever in his entire, 40 years of writing, and everybody started buying it. And he was like, oh, no, I love fantasy. What are you talking about? I'm a fantasy author. Like, no, screw you. You did that as a middle finger to us epic fantasy writers because you said we were stupid, because no one would ever have. And it's the reason why Ned Stark exists and no other character like that. Ned Stark existed to go, see, this is what everyone has as their hero in fantasy, and I'm gonna kill him for no reason. And so, like, literally, that is just an insult. Now, I like the first 3 books of the Game of Thrones. I think the 4th one was and then I've never been able to finish the 5th one. So, obviously, and it's never going to get finished anyway, so now who cares? So, but Game of Thrones is the quintessential example. I mean, I cannot tell you what the death rate of fans was after the Red Wedding. I mean, everyone went through Ned Stark's death and we're like, okay, this is what it is. Let's keep going, because I want to find out now what the ramifications are for this. Oh, nothing. But after the Red Wedding is when I know a butt ton of people were just like, I'm out, not reading this guy anymore ever again. So
I kept reading him because the characters that I was most invested in was Daenerys, Jon Snow, and Tyrion, and they were all still alive. Right? So for me, those 3 were enough to keep me reading. And I honestly, like, I felt very little for Robb Stark, so the Red Wedding,
right,
it didn't hurt me as much as it should have, because by that point I had gone like, Robb Stark is a freaking idiot.
Yeah.
He's an idiot being led around by his maleness, by his male organ, and yeah.
Yeah, and I get that. I'm just saying that from an actual, I mean, even TV fans, that group of fans that never read the book, never will read the book, that were only invested in the TV show, a ton of them stopped watching after the Red Wedding.
No, I know.
I mean, there was a huge drop off in viewership after that.
I mean, the Red Wedding on TV was hell of a serial. It was devastating to watch on TV, like far beyond the book, reading the book. Which I don't often say, but it really was.
I mean, I've only watched the pilot of the TV show. I've literally never watched a single episode after that, and I own them all. That was back before streaming was, really, really big, and so I was just buying them for $50 or whatever when the season would drop. So I have all 8 seasons on Blu-ray in my library in there, and I have still only watched the pilot. And it's mostly because it was at a time where I was busy. I was still reading. I was still hoping to read the books, and I really wanted to. I'm much more into the novels, always better. And then now it's like everybody's like, oh yeah, no, they totally botched the entire thing and ruined the entire show. I'm like, well, then to me, it's that whole, I never understood this about humans, where they're like, they'll take a bite of something. They're like, oh my God, that's disgusting. Try this. It's like, why? Why would I try that?
I would never recommend the Game of Thrones TV series to anyone at this point.
Yeah.
But
so now I'm like, maybe one day, I do own the whole thing. So maybe one day I'll break a leg and I'll, have to be hospitalized or, laid up in bed for whatever. And I might go, you know what? I'm suffering anyway. Let me just go ahead and binge.
And in a way, they also did the same thing. Like, they'd done terrible things to the characters and then gave you very little payoff.
Right. And that was my point with going down the Game of Thrones. There's no value to where you go. Another great example of that, which we have talked a little bit on this podcast, is Joe Abercrombie's First Law series, where the series ends at the end of Act 1 of Book 3. It's over. They beat the bad guy. They return home victorious. It's done. But that's where a normal fantasy book would end, or series would end. And then he spent the next 75% of that book showing you how horrible life is after these guys supposedly save the world. And every one of them suffers. Every one of them. I mean, like the romantic interest that was building, and they finally consummate at the end. They go home. He cheats on her, so she murders him and goes to jail and gets killed, hung for murder. Like everything just goes, and no payoff. Like, it's just horrible things happen to every single one of these characters that you fell in love with. And it was just like, why? There's no benefit to the readers at that point. And I've never read anything Abercrombie ever's written again.
No, me either.
Like, it always astounds me. Like, I know he just released something within the last year or so. And when I saw the ad, I was like, he's still allowed to, like, who would read him? Like, not that I'm not bitching about his writing or anything like that. It's just that as a fan, it negatively impacted me so much that I'm like, oh, I thought he was banned from writing. I thought nobody would ever read him again. So why would you give him money as a publisher? Because no one's going to buy his stuff. Obviously, he's got a big fan base. Obviously, he's still doing well. This is all just me, as a fan, being shocked that series negatively impacted me so much that I'm like, why would I ever read this guy again? Just like what you were saying about Hobbes. Why would you read it? Well, you don't know that they're going to do it again, but it's sort of like this. So my cat has figured out that the doggy door exists and how to use it. And that's bad because it's an inside cat. But it's also bad because we need the dog to be able to go in and out when the dog needs to go out. So this week I actually built because we don't have a door to put a doggy door in. So it's one of those strips that actually you just open the sliding glass door a little bit and it just fits in there. So I handmade a kind of a replacement for that out of wood. And we ordered a doggy door that has the collar that when the dog approaches, it unlocks, the dog goes out, and then it locks. And so we're hoping that this is it. However, while it did take a few times to get the dog used to going through, because it's different, it's a completely different thing, and it's a lot harder and all this other stuff. So we had to each one of us sat on either side with snacks, and we'd be like, "You can get a snack, come on out," and the dog would go out and give him a snack, and it's like, "Get a snack, come in," and the dog would come in. But this morning, I learned that the doggy door has a little bit of a delay. So first thing in the morning, I take the dog out, and he's very anxious to get outside, because it's been all night. And so he went beeline for his doggy door, and it didn't unlock by the time he got there. So he slammed into it, and then it went click. And I'm like, "I'm so sorry, it's unlocked now." And he's like, "No, it isn't. I am not going." Like, no, I just got smacked in the face. I'm not doing that. Screw you. You can open the door now. I'm done.
Yeah.
And so now I'm like, oh, he's probably never going to want to use this stupid door again. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
You've used this door. You've read a million books. You've used this door. It always works. They change it to a new door. You trust that it's going to do what it should have done before, and you run into it, and it just breaks your nose because you slam into it as fast as you can run. And you're like, yeah, I'm never going through that door again. But like, why would I? And so that's the thing. And again, to take this back where I open this, the only thing that's real is the reader. If you do that kind of damage to them, that kind of harm to them, and you haven't given them what they need just because you think it's cool, or you're giving a middle finger to an industry, or and I'm sure that Abercrombie, he did this on purpose. He actually wanted to show, you don't write 75% of a book where you literally make everyone suffer unless that's the purpose of what you're doing. And so that's malicious intent. You're maliciously intending to hurt your audience. And I don't see how you can be amazed when people are like, I own her fourth book. It's in my Kindle library, and I'm not going to read it, which means you're not even going to buy the fifth book. And I'm actually surprised that you even bought the fourth book. A lot of times, most people be like, I'm not even going to buy it because I know where it's going to go, and I'm not going to read it.
I really love Fitz. I really love that series a lot. Abercrombie, I read First Law, and I will never read another Abercrombie book for the same reason. I'm like, I am done. Now, obviously the line is in different places for different people, because Abercrombie has got a huge fan base.
Yes.
And there are a lot, and Robin Hobb has a huge fan base.
Yep.
Okay, like these are not small authors. They do not, they are big A-list authors that a lot of people read and enjoy. But certain, and I mean the same for Jim Butcher, like it's massive.
Same for Lord Game of Thrones.
But I was thinking about it also because I was also comparing it to to Jacqueline Carey, who also and even like to the things that we've done to our characters, and so on, the things we talked about. It's like she does equally horrifying things. She, there's in Cashil's Dart, one of the guys begins to skin the heroine. The first person heroine begins to skin her alive on the battlefield. That is not small. And there's all kinds of, like, she goes through emotional trauma and she goes into this. It's just, yeah, there's a lot. But I know that at the end, there will be healing and there will be love and there will be grace and they will come out of it stronger.
Yeah, for me, it's always...
And that's what I want.
Right. For me, it's always the tragedy is what ends up being the catalyst of why they were able to overcome. Because without the tragedy, they wouldn't have gained the inner strength that they needed to be able to do the thing that they need to do. Therefore, and so then, as a reader, you suffer. I mean, I make you suffer. There's no doubt about that. But I'm trying to, because again, the only thing that's real to me is you. So I'm making you live through this suffering from the safety and comfort of wherever you're at reading. It's not like you're actually going through it. But you know that I am going to use your suffering to give you more strength so that you actually become a better able to handle the situation that you're going to find yourself in. So you're like, I mean, it's like me with cancer. I wouldn't, if you could just go, hey, here's a button, push it, and you didn't have cancer, and all of that's gone from history. I'd push that button every single time. However, there are things that cancer did to me that I am now different. I'm different emotionally, I'm different mentally, I'm different with my family, I'm different with how I view my life. That would not have happened had I not literally been on death's door with a disease that kills 1 in 3 people. Yeah. Like I don't want to go through that. I don't want anyone else to go through that. However, because of who I am and because how I think, it also improved me. And so that's why I don't have animosity toward cancer. It's horrid, but it also did things positive for me that wouldn't have happened had this tragedy not befell me. Right. And so,
and like that. Okay, so if I put it into 2 examples of 2 authors that I know really well, that I read a lot of. Yeah. So Jim Butcher, and sorry, spoilers for book 16 or whatever it is of Dresden Files. Jim Butcher has, throughout 16 novels, every time, like clockwork, that Dresden gets a love interest. The love interest either dies or something horrible happens to her. Okay? And Harry finally gets with Murphy, and you're like, okay, this one's going to work, because this is what the series has been building towards.
Yeah, it's been a long time, and I only read the first book, but isn't Murphy the cop in the beginning?
Murphy's the cop. Yeah.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
It's been a 16-book journey to get you. 16 books. And he kills her in the battle that Harry didn't want her to go to, and that she insisted on being in. I'm like, really? 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 I'm done.
Yeah.
Okay. Now contrast that with, in the 3rd book of Cashil's Avatar, right? In the 3rd book of the Cashil Legacy series, in Cashil's Avatar, Fedre...
By which author?
Jacqueline Carey.
Okay, just want to make sure you threw that out there.
Yeah, by Jacqueline Carey. Phaedra goes into a literal hell, right? Where she serves as the love interest of a man who wants to drown the world in 1,000 years of darkness. And she does it on the very slender hope that she has no idea how, but that she's going to be able to stop him. And because he falls in love with her, he can sacrifice her to bring the darkness into the world. But because he does so, he gives her one opportunity to be alone in the dark with him, and she kills him with a hairpin. Yeah? It was amazing. And it was gross. It's such a payoff. And her relationship with Jocelyn, her actual companion and her consort, is obviously, it's shattered by this event. The Angelines are very open and free about this stuff. This was actually fantastic. The way this was set up is he had to take Phaedra. So Jocelyn, her consort, had to take Phaedra and sell her to this madman in order for them to get an entry point. And then he served that madman as like a warrior in his, inner circle. So obviously, like, he saw they came out of that broken. And then about a third of the remainder of the book is spent just on them healing as a couple. And the payoff for it was just, and I was like, all of that agony that I went through in Darsanga, I would do it again, because the payoff at the end is amazing. And that
again,
is
the only one that's real.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is, to me, is the problem with this realistic, gritty, grimdark approach. That you see it in Martin, you see it in Joe Abercrombie, you see it in Robin Hobb, where they might save the world, but is this world even worth saving?
Right. Well, so while you were talking, that also leads me to a trope that's way more common in TV than anything else, because they have to produce so many. But it's the reason why I always hate when a TV show is built around the premise of will they, won't they?
Mm.
Because the problem is that either you get canceled, and so you never know, you never get the answer to it, or you become successful and therefore you can't answer the question because you keep letting it go. And now it's just annoying, because it's like with Bones, 20,000 seasons into it, it's like, oh, look, he's finally free and doesn't have a boyfriend, girlfriend. Oh, but she has a boyfriend. Like, it's always, every time. Like, if it happens once or twice, okay, whatever. But literally year after year after year, I've got a spouse that, or a cinnamon of this year, but you got none. But next year you have one and I have none, and now I have one and you have none, and you have not one and I have none. It's like, that's just boring. But they know, because it is the way it is. If you answer the question, the show's over. You almost never. Bones is one of the only ones that ever survived that, and somehow they moved into the dynamic of husband, wife, child, and it worked. It worked for a couple more seasons. But like Castle, once they, like, it was over. Like, that show was just went downhill like an airplane speeding to the ocean floor. Like, it was terrible. But it was great up until, then, until it was, then we're stretching it too far, and then it became painful. And then once they were like, fine, we'll give you the answer, and then it was just like, oh yeah, but you can't, there's nowhere to go, because that's all you have. So it's kind of the same thing in all of this stuff, where you have to think about what the audience, that's why, like, with TV shows, it would be so much nicer, sort of like A Good Place, which is still, in my opinion, probably one of the absolute best TV shows ever created, period. I know we talk a lot about Ted Lasso here recently, and so far, other than one episode that pissed me off, and one episode that was weird, it's been fantastic. However, I haven't seen the end yet. And when it comes to The Good Place, it was spot on every episode, every character, all the way to the end, every bit of it, including the finale that they did 3 different times, was amazing. Because I mean, that was the thing that probably shocked me the most is you get to the end of season 3 and you get to this episode and it's this beautiful, amazing ending. And you're like, there's no like perfect ending. We're 100%. Wait, there's 2 more episodes. Oh, no. Don't do that. You will literally ruin the ending you just did. And then the next episode comes out and you're like, okay, that's even better. Like that's brilliant, amazing. But there's still 1 episode. You can't beat this. Like, don't do that episode. You're just gonna, end it. And then it's like, nope, it's even better. Like, so it literally ends 3 times in a row in 3 different stages, not 3 different ways. Not like what they tried to do with Lost, which was Lost. But 3, it's like, here's the end, but what happens after that? And then here's that, and what happens after that? And here's like, it was breathtakingly well written.
Yeah.
Like every bit of The Good Place. But they had that already figured out. They were like, hey, we got this show. We're going to do, I can't remember, it was 3 or 4 seasons, whatever it was. This is what we're going to do. This is how it ends. This is where we're going to. This is the whole thing. We're not doing another thing after this. This is the story. And so it was fantastic because they knew where it was going. They knew how to pay off the ending. And all they had to do was just not get canceled until they finish it up. They're done. When you have something that's open-ended, that's relying on this one plot device, I think that's your mistake. Like with Castle, they should have said, okay, here's the story. We can do it in 3 seasons, 4 seasons, 5 seasons, whatever. And this is what we're going to do. And this is the path. And this is the payoff and everything like that. Sort of like what, I don't know, we novelists do. Just throwing that out there. But it's the same thing. It's still understanding that everything is about the reader. Everything is about the audience. Everything is about what are you going to give to that audience to make them satisfied that they've gone through this journey with you, as opposed to, I'm just doing this because it's all about the gut-wrenching punch. So let's talk about a couple, like, what are some things that you feel that you've done horrendous to your characters that made the reader suffer, that then you feel like you gave them the pain? No spoilers, but I'm just saying.
So I'll tell you one thing I didn't do. In the second book,
I thought you were going to go, one thing I didn't do is I didn't take magic away from one of my characters.
No. In the second book, my original plan was to kill Louis's daughter. And then I came to the point and I looked at the scene and I looked at Louis's reaction and I was like, I will never be able to pay off this pain. Not in a million lifetimes will I be able to give any kind of satisfaction to doing this kind of injury to the character.
Yeah. And I
didn't
wholeheartedly agree with you
yeah.
on that one.
Yeah. So it's just like, nope.
so on the same note, but a different angle. And I've never admitted this publicly. There are some fans that know this, and definitely my inner circle knows this or whatever, but I've never admitted this publicly. One of the biggest reasons why I was so adamant on, if I'm going to re-release Genesis Saga now that it's been out of print and that publisher went out of business and blah, 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 that I was going to rewrite it from scratch is, and no one has ever noticed this, no fan has ever noticed this, no one. Book 1 has a plot point that it's shooting toward. Book 2 redirects that and goes in a completely different direction. Now, I did it in a way that really massaged things, and you do not notice it from one to the other, but it's still there to me because I know what I was doing. And what it was actually a fan derivative. So the lion dude, Klain, in book 1, when I wrote that, he was the villain. He was the big bad that they were going to have to deal with by book 4 and book 5. He was the thing that was going to shatter the world. And then book 1 hit, and he became the ultimate fan favorite, like so far above and beyond the other characters that I literally had to sit down and go, can I make him the big bad now and not lose my entire fan base? And so that's the reason why I had to adjust book 2 and go to a different angle, because I knew that if I took him down the path that I had planned from the very beginning, it's not like I was like, ooh, I'm, now that everyone loves him, I'm going to do this thing. Because I think that's what it would have felt like. because I did too good of a job of making everyone fall in love with him in the beginning. And while it was very still a logical thing, so he starts as a slave, every human that he's ever had beats the crap out of him. He hates humanity, even though he's trying to fit in. And so his arc was going to be that once he reunited with his people for the first time and he learned kind of the subjugation of everything they've dealt with, he realistically, even though it's still prejudice, realistically went, if I kill all humans, that's a good thing. And of course, genocide is never a good thing, no matter what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So it would be a realistic plot arc for this character. However, realism be damned. I don't think fans would have swallowed that.
Yeah.
And so I had to change. I had to move, and I was forced to because of the fact of I knew from the very beginning it's always about the reader, and this would not be good for them. They would not appreciate, even I could argue all the but look how realistic it is. Look how horrible humanity treated him. Why would you do any different than this? Because you're not a hero, and we're reading a hero story, and we want our heroes to be better than us so that we have something to look up to. Not to take it too far off the subject, but just made me think about this. It's why I feel so many people aren't enjoying the movies that have been made over these last 4 or 5 years, because they're all about what would happen in reality. Everyone is a piece of garbage, and so in reality there wouldn't be these heroes. It's almost like Hollywood is doing the George Martin thing and just sticking a middle finger at heroism instead of just fantasy. They're doing it at all heroism, because in the real world, nobody will actually sacrifice themselves for any of this stuff. Of course not. That's why we're the stories. We want to look up to them. We want to go, man, I wish I could do, I hope that if I get put in this situation, that I make the better choice, that I'm the better human being. Like, that's what we want. We want inspirational stories that we hope that, it's something we can achieve, not just everybody's a piece of crap. And yeah, when I get in that situation, I'm just gonna be a piece of crap too, just like all these other heroes. And for those that are not watching YouTube, I'm air quoting heroes, because when you have this, everything's a shade of gray and everybody is just in it for themselves. So there's nothing to aspire to from a reader standpoint.
So I obviously have very shade of gray characters in Sangwell Chronicles.
Me as well.
Right. But my shade of gray characters are still within the confines of their world, are still reasonable kind of people, and they have relatability. But one of the things I did with Louis in the first book was I had him do something truly heinous. And in it's the mid-act 2 climax, where he kills someone, and that death, and he's an assassin, he's got a big body count, he's killed a lot of people, but that death haunts him throughout the rest of the trilogy. And I think the payoff for that death is sufficient for what was done, right? To like the kind of injury that death did to him, and the growth that comes from it. And it might have been too much for some people. I don't know. But like, that's why I sheared away from that killing of his daughter. I was like, yeah, there's no paying this back. It's
and see, that's much. The thing. It's about thinking about that. So like in Genesis, one of the characters, the first time he ever kills anything, it's an accident. He accidentally murders somebody that didn't deserve it. But to make it worse, he does it in front of his own mother. So now not only does he accidentally murder someone, his mother watches him do it.
Yeah.
And so you have that added everything that goes along with that, because you're the hero, you're a good person, you're and you're your mom's little boy, and like and then you do this heinous act, and he didn't understand what he was doing. Is there's situations to it, but again, I do it because even though it is a very painful thing to live through, and then you have to live through his grief, and you have to live through his holding himself accountable for this, and you have to live through all of this stuff. The payoff, again, to me, makes that miserable journey so much worth it, and it gives him the strength of what he needs to accomplish what he needs to accomplish. So it's not about not doing things. But when you brought this up, it made me think of, because I think we should at least end with some, like, okay, well, how do you do that? Yes. So like, one of the things for me that I think is you don't end on it. And I think that's what so many people do. So like when you were saying Robin Hobbs and the Dresden ending with it every time, it brought up the James Bond, you know, the very famous James Bond, where he finally gets married to that Italian heiress or whatever. And literally in the rolling credits at the end, a car comes by, you know, they're just leaving the wedding. They're getting ready to go on their honeymoon. She's still in her wedding dress, and a drive-by shooting happens, and they riddle the car with bullets, and he gets out and he returns fire, but he doesn't, you know, they just drive off. And then he comes in and he's going to chase them because he's James Bond. He jumps in the car, getting ready to chase, and he looks over and she's just riddled with bullets. Like, she's absolutely dead. And then there's this beautiful touching scene where he's holding her and crying. And of course that launches the James Bond of the next movie, where he just literally murders every single person that is a criminal on just a massive killing spree that's not sanctioned by his, you know, MI6. And we get it. And so I get all that. And that one actually works. It's okay. But I think that's where a lot of these come into. And so I don't remember exactly where, because I'm pretty sure that Louis scene that you were talking about is not, it's the mid-act 2 climax, right? Yeah. So you're talking about, now you have the entire book to actually recoup that. And so that I do the same thing, you know, when I have killed off POV characters, but never at the end. Like, it's just, that's not a lot of writers, I think, fall into this, oh, but it's going to be this great cliffhanger, but they forget what that is going to do to the reader. That now you're leaving them on this horribly sour note, that they're sure every reader is going to assume that you're probably going to make amends for this in the next book. But so many people, especially if you've done it a couple times, now you get the 4th book of Robin Hobbs' book and you're just like, yeah, I'm just not going to read it.
And even if you have personally, you know, fixed it every time you've done it, bear in mind, you are laboring under the weight of the industry. You're laboring under the weight of an industry that has a Joe Abercrombie and a George R. R. Martin and a Robin Hobb, and people who do leave their characters in misery. So if a reader doesn't know you and they encounter this right at the end of the book, they're like, yeah, I know what authors do at this point, and they put you down and they're done.
Yeah, the thing that popped in my head when you said that is a related thing, but a completely unrelated thing. When you have sex with someone, you're actually having sex with everyone they've ever had sex with. So it's the same thing. When you read a novel, when someone reads your novel, they're actually reading every novel they've ever read at the same time as they're reading your novel. And so they're bringing all that baggage in with them. And if they have, you know, PTSD from somebody who was cruel and not a good caretaker of being a storyteller, you have to deal with that. Even though you can't deal with that because it's a book that you've written and it's going to go out there to the world and you have no idea what baggage anybody's bringing in. There is no condom for your book that's going out there into the world. So it's, yeah, I mean, that is that's a brilliant point, that you don't know the baggage that your audience is bringing into this. And so if you follow, because the reason why I'm going down this path is we all have this thing of, oh, I want to take a trope that you think I'm going down, and then I'm, you know, that it pisses people off that I'm not going to go down. And I do that all the time, where I'll make you feel this, and it sometimes backfires. I mean, like in the Genesis saga, I have one race called Elmorantians. It starts with EL. They're described as taller than humans, skinnier than humans, more powerful in magic than humans. I mean, I couldn't have been more heavy-handed by saying that this is this world's elves. And there is a review out there on Goodreads where somebody, it's like a 2-star review or whatever, and they were like, I can't believe this guy did this. It's obvious they're elves. Why don't you just call them elves? Why are you trying to call them something else when, but they don't look like elves. It's not like they have pointy ears and they look like aliens. They literally look like your traditional gray with the big teardrop head and the skinny little body. And like they're very awkward looking. And it's just like that. And the reason for that is I have so many fans that are like, this world is simulation and the aliens are actually in charge. Like, and again, that's just me playing with their preconceived notions. Turns out the Elmorantians are nothing like elves, and they're nothing like what you think they are. But you don't get that until book 3.
Yeah.
Now, is that a good thing for me to hide that until then, or a bad thing to hide that for? Obviously, for this reader who gave me a 2-star review and was like, I will never read this guy again because he's just using elves and he's just trying to be clever and just use elves. Sure, I could be satisfied and go, haha, joke's on you. Had you just kept reading, you would have noticed, you would have found out that I didn't do that. And luckily, it's something that, as far as I know, he's one of the only people that have put the book down because I went down this trope that I'm going to circumvent. But you have to think about that. You have to think about, because this guy obviously has some baggage. He's obviously read fantasy authors that try to be, think they're being clever by, well, I don't have dwarves, I have dwaves. But they're literally just mining underground, short, chubby, bearded, like grumpy alcoholics. They're literally every stereotype of every dwarf that's ever been created in any fantasy world, but they're called draves instead of dwarves. That gets annoying. Like if all you're going to do is change the name and change none of the tropes that are associated with it, none of the, you do nothing new for your dwarves except for change their name, then yeah, too many people do that and it's just bad. And so obviously he's walking into my world with that baggage and I can't help. I mean, I can't help that. Yeah. I can just hope that maybe one day he gives me a second chance and comes into book 2. And then, when he hits book 3, he's like, this is nothing like what I thought. Okay, good misdirect, sir. Very good misdirect. But again, you have to make those calls and you have to decide, because I'm not changing in the rewrite. I still really love that. And so far, he's the only one that I know of that is burdened by that.
So I think this is the lesson that you should take from this podcast is you can do terrible, terrible things to your characters, obviously. And the line for readers will be in different places, depending on, which baggage they come into the story with. But to retain more readers, you need to give them a payoff. And if you're like in your first book or so, then you want to do that injury early enough in the book that you can build up to a payoff in the same book.
Yes.
Because that will increase astronomically the chances that they will buy your second book. Because they will have some trust in you. And it is unlikely that they will put the book down in the middle of the injury. They'll probably read to the end to see if you pay it off.
Yes. And this is also one of the reasons why I love being an epic fantasy author with multiple character arcs. Because as a case in point, the lion dude at the end of book 2, it does end in a horrific thing that happens to him. And that's it. That's the end of the book. However, because there are 4 other POV characters that are having different tragedies at different times and different payoffs at different times, and it is also the second book, you do get the ability to earn that trust of the readers, because they're like, all right, look, I went through the first book, everybody had tragedies and everybody, I felt very happy and satisfied at the end of it. Here we are on the second book, everybody has tragedies. These 4, definitely worked through that. I'm very satisfied with how their tragedy was overcome. This one is now ending in a massive cliffhanger where it's just pain and misery. But you know what? I trust this author. I know that this is not, in that next book or, at some point in the future, this author is going to give me the payoff that makes, and here's the crazy thing that I'm saying all this. Don't get me and Marie wrong. We are not saying that readers actually have the fortitude and intelligence to even think about this stuff. This is not conscious level thinking. This is subconscious level thinking.
This is what they vibe with your book.
Right, exactly. No one goes, well, 9 out of 10 of the tragedies that I've had to live through have all worked out really well, made me feel good. So I'm definitely going to trust him that he's going to fix the 10th one that he's leaving me hanging. They don't think that way. They just innately know that they've had so many good payoffs, and they've felt that the story has moved them in a positive direction internally in their own lives, that it doesn't even come up. No one at the end of book 2 goes, well, I'm worried that he's not going to give a payoff for this Klain character, so I'm just not going to read the 3rd book. No one does that because first of all, they're not thinking about it. But second of all, I've given them all the reason to feel good about where the story goes, because there's so many other story arcs that have given them, including Klain's. His second book's or his first story ends in a very high note, and then his second story doesn't. And so, yes, we're not saying that readers actually think about this. We're saying you have to think about this. Yes. Like you're the one that has to decide how the reader is going to feel and what you need to do to make sure that what they're going to feel is going to be what internally, subconsciously. That's why I call the invisible layer the fulfilling a reader's unknown expectations. And that's a really weird dichotomy of word choices, but I do it on purpose. Readers have expectations, but they have no idea that they have those expectations, and they'll never know that they have those expectations. All they know is at the end of it, I'm never reading this person again. Joe Abercrombie, I was a fan back when I read that. It wasn't even like, maybe it came out at the beginning of the Drake persona, but I think I might have even read it before Drake, because I do divide the world, my world into 2 halves. The last 20 years has been the birth of Drake and the Drake persona, and me becoming, super, super hyper focused on storytelling and writing. And then before that, sure, I wrote my first book when I was 12, but I was much more of a fan than a professional writer back then. So I can't remember where that falls. But again, I'm not thinking about, I'll never read Joe Abercrombie again because of this thing. I'm thinking, as a fan, I was not fulfilled. This actually did not make me have any good feelings. Therefore, why would I ever go back to this? In other words, you gave me a new doggy door. You showed me that it worked. And then when I tried to use it on my own, I smashed my nose into the plastic. Like, screw you. I'm not doing it anymore. So, yeah, it's you have to think about this as a writer. You have to know what the reader's going to be feeling. You have to anticipate that, test that out, get your beta readers, get, other feedback, ask those specific questions. Now that I've killed Bob, how did that make you feel? Why do you feel this way? Okay, now that this other stuff happened, how does that now make you feel looking back on Bob's death? Did I get my payoff? You don't ask it like that, but you get that feedback of how does it make you feel. And if they're like, oh man, when you killed Bob, I was heartbroken. I hated you. I still read, obviously, because we're in the middle of the book, but wow, knowing that this wouldn't have happened without Bob's death, knowing that all of this other stuff couldn't have succeeded, that's so much more important than my love for that Bob character. Yeah, I hate it. I hated having cancer, but I get what I've gained after that. That's what you have to get. And the only way to do that is to test it out. Hopefully before you throw it up on Amazon and get, 1,000 negative reviews. Although I said that last night at the Critique Pod, and I was like, actually, you won't get 1,000 negative reviews. If you get 1,000 negative reviews, that means you sold quite a few copies. What you'll get is 10 negative reviews and no other sales, because that's pretty much like, you need thousands of positive reviews before people are like, you know what, I might trust this one. But you need like 10 negative reviews, and they're like, yep, not buying it. I'm out. Like, it's funny the way that works.
Yeah. And I think that is a good place on which to end this episode. And we will see you soon for another one.
Bye.